All right, rather than it kind of exactly going on, I want to show you two more things, okay? So I'm going to grab this entire program that we've been working on. I'm going to grab every bit of it, just dragging over it with my left mouse button, holding down on Control key, tapping the letter C to copy it to the clipboard. Then I'm going to go into JavaScript Runner, which is the other one I told you about, and I'm going to paste it in there. It looks a little funky because of the size, but that's no problem. And I run it. Should look pretty familiar to you. You get the same output. I find JS bin, it's a little easier on the eyes. You may or may not agree. This was actually created, this tool, I believe, by a teacher. And I used to use his book. All right, but most students, well, why don't you use it anymore? Because most students found the book very confusing. All right. So that's the first thing that I wanted to show you. Again, you can use that. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you is this. All right. What I've done here is I've got this is the whole program. All right, so that's everything right there that we just worked on. Okay? And what I've done is it is now in its own file called firstjs.js. Okay? And if you look at this example here, everything I'm doing, I'm going to throw it out on the system. It'll be out there. All right? That's where in that in-class folder, that's where I'll put everything. It'll have today's date on it. It'll be in there. So I've taken the JavaScript and separated it out. All right? Now I've got an HTML file. It's pretty darn simple. And it's pretty darn small. It's 12 lines. This is my doc type declaration right here. HTML is a tag-based language, so there's my beginning and my ending HTML tags, my beginning and my ending body tags, my beginning and my ending head tags, my beginning and my ending title tags. All right? All I'm doing right here is I'm saying put a button on the page, and the button's going to say on it, run program. When you click that button, call main. Where's main? That's in this file that's right here. All right? So what I've done in this example that I've shown you right here is that is going and basically having an external or a reference to an external JavaScript file inside of an HTML file. And you'll notice if I run this, now I can come back in here and run it right from Notepad++ and say launch it in Chrome. There's the button, run program, same thing. And it comes back, do you want to do it again? And you can keep doing it. All right, so that is one way of doing it. The other thing that I can do if I want to is I can come in and literally embed the JavaScript. So here I've taken my whole program and I've thrown it inside of that HTML program that I just showed you. That's considered really poor programming practice because I'm mixing HTML, which is one language, with JavaScript, which is another language. All right, if you've only got something that's a line or two, that's not too bad. But even this, 20 or so lines, that's too much to do. All right. But you'll notice also if I run this one, this is inline. All right, so if I run this one, same thing. All right. So what I've tried to show you here is 4 different ways that you can create and run a JavaScript program. You can create it right inside of JS bin, and we just did that one. You can create it right inside of that JavaScript runner. All right. You can create it as its own file and then, as its own .js file and then link to it inside of your HTML file, or you can embed it right inside of your HTML file. All right? Now, I'm not saying that totally makes sense, but I'm just trying to let you know there are a number of different ways that you can do this. And just so you know, I could have come in here and I could have added the HTML tag here and I could have done it this way too. So in other words, I could have taken all that code that you see right there, all that code, I can grab all of it, I can cut it from here. I'm not going to cut it, I'm just going to copy it. All right. And then I could have taken it and put it in there inside of script tags like I just showed you. So there's always a multiple number of ways that you can create this stuff and a multiple number of ways that you can run this stuff. All right, and that's the point I'm trying to get across to you. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention to you is, whether you think so or not, what we did in the last class, you may or may not remember, but what we did was we went over the syllabus, and when we got done with the syllabus, I mentioned that I put a copy of the book right here on the P drive, and it's out there. If you weren't here last class and you don't know how to get to that, just talk to me after class and I'll show you. Not a problem. But what I want to mention to you is, last class we went over chapter 1, so I'm not going to touch that. But if we go and look at chapter 2 in here, this is the wrong way. Why would I always press the wrong button in here? So if we look at chapter 2, it says, understand the options available for developing JavaScript. I've shown you some of them. The author shows you some that I have not even mentioned. You can bring up what's called Visual Studio that's on your virtual desktop. Visual Studio is known as an IDE. It's an integrated development environment. It's kind of like the JS bin, but on steroids, because you can do a lot more things with it that you can't do otherwise. All right. And they also talk about using Eclipse, which is another IDE that you can use. All right. Again, the bottom line is, it's not that important where you go and create these. All right. And that's what the author kind of says in here. So he goes through how to do it in Visual Studio 2012. I don't see the necessity for showing that to you right now. All right. I have no idea with Jim, because Jim Schmidt's teaching the afternoon class, if he's showing people that or not. Using external JavaScript files. I just showed you how to use external JavaScript files. Not with Visual Studio, but I showed you how to use them with Notepad. I'm trying to keep this simple. All right, there's a few rules, so to speak, that I go by with, especially in the first semester. And along with keeping it simple, I would say the same thing to you. Keep your code simple. And now what I'm about to say is going to sound almost contradictory to that, but sometimes you can write a statement in code that looks like this. And don't worry about it. It's not going to probably make any sense. But you can write something like A equals B plus C times D divided by E times F modulo G. You can write something like that. Don't worry about what that means. It really doesn't mean much of anything right now. But sometimes it makes more sense. You look at this, and this is just way too confusing. So sometimes you split that up over 2 or 3 lines, because then it makes a lot more sense to you. If that's the case for you as we learn this stuff, sometimes you're going to write more code, but it'll improve your understandability. You should be shooting for understandability in this semester. All right, because this is laying the foundation for the stuff that you're going to do after this. So, writing this as opposed to breaking it down, all right, and writing it over several lines, it's going to be a little bit more work, but if it helps you understand it, it's probably worth the time and effort to do it. All right. They talk also in here, they just mention, they talk about debugging JavaScript. And debugging is when you have an error. All right. Now, you may or may not be aware of this, but if I go, and it doesn't matter, I could do it in Chrome. This is the document that we were just doing from this morning. I've got it out on YouTube. It's not yet done producing. But what I want to show you is, with this up here, you see those F keys that you have at the top of your keyboard? They go from F1 to F12. I'm going to hit the F12 key. All right? And you look at it and go, what the heck is that? What this is right here is, this is all the HTML and CSS and JavaScript that causes this to happen. And you can go into Firefox, and you can go into Chrome, and you can hit the F12 key with any page up and take a look at what's in there. All right? And there's a way to do it in IE, but it's a little bit, it's IE tools, and I don't remember what it is. But virtually every browser lets you do that. And it's another cool way to learn things. And you'll notice, for example, here, what do they have? Script source equals. What does that mean? That means that they have some kind of a JavaScript file that they created someplace that's external. And the reason typically on a website that you see stuff external like that is especially if somebody's done a lot of work, well, if somebody else goes and looks at that, then they can grab that code. Oh no, I didn't grab that code. Mine just happens to look unbelievably a lot like yours. All right, but people do stuff like that all the time. That's not legal to do. And please don't say, well, gee, Jeff told us that we should go out there and take other people's code. No, you shouldn't do that.
Can you click on it?
Can you do what? You can click on it and it's showing you, if I click someplace else, what it's doing is it'll basically in here, it'll show you, like if I click here, it'll show you where I am basically in here. All right, this isn't a good example because it's not really very interactive, but you can do it with any file. And not only that, and I haven't worked a lot with the one from Chrome, but I've worked a little bit with the one from Firefox. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Firefox and just bring up Blackhawk's page. All right, hit F12, and you'll notice now it's on the bottom of the page. That's fantastic. Look at that. All right, but you can come in here, and there are actually ways that you can just key in stuff in here. You can literally key JavaScript code in here. You can go to what's called a console and start keying in stuff. All right, and if it's your own web page, I don't know if this is exactly a question, but if it's your own web page and you do this, you could even come down here and there's these different tabs that are up here. Yeah. For instance, you can come in and without changing your actual file, you can grab the CSS, you can change the color, and it'll immediately change up here, which is kind of a cool thing, especially when you're in testing mode to see. And I don't know if that's what you were asking or not, but that's kind of a neat little tool to have. Sometimes you're trying to tweak a color, you want it to be a certain shade of blue, and you keep changing it and changing. Oh, that's the one I want. All right, and then you save it, type of an idea. All right, and then again, quickly, Chapter 3, we've actually gone through a bunch of this stuff that's in here today. Understand the basic rules of using the JavaScript programming language. Well, that's an ongoing task. All right, place JavaScript correctly within a web page. Again, I showed you two different ways to place it within an HTML page. Either place it in there directly, all right, or have an external reference to it. Okay, when you do that, for a while people were saying put that stuff up in the head section, all right, and then it was move it down to the body section. And the stuff that's in the head doesn't show on your actual web page. The stuff in the body does. And then it was back, put it in the head again. Now it's back, put it in the body again. It's like my wife, whenever I try to throw out certain ties, she says, leave them alone. Leave them in the closet. They'll come back into style one of these days. All right, it's the same kind of thing. It's not even that one way is right or wrong to do it. Most of the time when you see JavaScript embedded, like I did when I put the actual program, most of the time that's put in the body. And when you do an external reference, most of the time that's in the head. But I put mine in the body and it worked just fine. All right, recognize a JavaScript statement and recognize a reserved word. Well, again, there's a key thing. JavaScript is a case-sensitive language. So all the stuff that we looked at before, when we were in here, wherever we were, and I might have clicked there. If I'd have come in here and all this stuff that we looked at in our program here, let me close that and space this out again. All right. If I'd have come in here and done this, first name, okay? Now when I run it, it says enter first name here, okay. Enter last name, okay. This. Now it stopped. And it stopped because now in here, it's trying to find something called first name with a capital N. And it blew up. All right. And it blew up because I changed that. All right. So what you get in JSBin is a very interactive environment like this, but you don't get many debug facilities built into this. All right. I can change that, otherwise I'll forget to. All right. So not only are your variable names case sensitive, your function names are case sensitive. All right. Now, let's see. Question got asked to me during the break about this. And the question was, well, Jeff, you said you should put everything in uppercase, or in lowercase rather, and there the word enter is in uppercase. Anything you see in double quotes like this, that's just literal text. That it doesn't matter what case you put it in. But variable names that you create should either be all lowercase, or what you see here with first name and last name, that's referred to as camel case. Where if you run two words together, the first word's in lowercase, and the first letter of the next word is in uppercase. That's the recommended way to create variable names. That's the way I'll ask you to use. Again, some books, instead of showing it like this, like I've got right there, instead of putting in first name like that, they'll put it in as first, and they'll put in underscore and name. I don't like that. Not every language supports using an underscore. Sometimes it has to be a different character. All right, so I like using this one. That's the way that I was taught to do it. And we really didn't go over this, but hopefully this makes sense to you. That says if that variable, that prompt, I said hit the enter key. Why? Because that was set to yes. So here we said if again equal yes, call main again. All right? And you may have noticed that if you only made one equal there, didn't work right. Because single equal in any language means assignment. And what that means is if I had just said if again equals yes, it would have said take the word yes and assign it to again. If you have two equals like this, that says test it for equality. That says does this variable currently hold that value? All right? And it's case sensitive, so you'll notice if I run this, and it comes back, and if I put in here yes in uppercase, it stops because it was looking for a capital Y, a lowercase e, and a lowercase s. So you say, well, can't you force that? Yes, and we're going to learn how to do that. And actually, that's too much work. All we really have to do, what we'll end up doing in a case like this, is we'll check the first letter. And we'll see whether or not it's a Y. Because sometimes if you ask the person if they want to do it again, they, yeah, yes, Y, whatever. So as long as they put a Y in there, and we don't even care if it's upper or lowercase. And we'll do all that stuff within the next few weeks. I mentioned about white space before, and they're showing right here. You can write a JavaScript, that's an entire JavaScript program right there. You know, you might have your own feelings as to how it looks, but compare that to what's down below, which is the same program. And you can see by just putting in a little bit of white space, typically it helps the look and feel of the program. There are no hard and fast rules over how you do this. And what I mean by that is some people, if I write this, if x greater than 3, y equals 7. I'm making it up. It doesn't mean anything. Some people will always write that like this. And they'll put their curly brace here, and they might even put their end one there. You see that? That's style. That's not substance. I don't care what kind of style you develop while you're here. There's a good chance that if you go on and you get a job as a programmer, you might have a manual thrown at you where you have no choice over what your style is. You're just told you're going to do it like this. I remember I was a programmer for about 4 years for AT&T Bell Labs before the big breakup. All right, and the first day I was there, they gave me a book that was like this, literally this big. And I said, what is that? They said, it's our standard operating procedures, and it'll teach you how to do a lot of stuff like code. So me being a smartass, I said, that's all? And he goes, no, there's a second volume, but we only gave you volume 1. All right, so some places are like that. They're so regimented in how they do different things. In other places, you'll have all sorts of latitude. So I figured while you're here, just start to establish your own style. But I will tell you, when you do things like this, I don't care how you do them, but develop a consistent style, because it'll make it much easier for you when you're looking through your own code. If I show you 4 or 5 ways to do things, and you might say, well, this one makes the most sense, that's the one you should use. All right? Comments we talked about, single line comment, multi-line comment, so you've seen that before. Again, even though JavaScript, okay, here's an example where if you wrote this, you'd get the wrong results. If you put the word return on a line by itself, then on the next line you put in var name like that, you get an error message. Because the system would see that the word return and say, oh, you just forgot to put a semicolon on the end, and it would return back from a function. But then there's another line here. You can't have any code after that return statement, so it would blow up. So if you always do go in and you always put in at the end of an executable statement, put a semicolon on the end like we've been doing, you're best off. All right. Notice there is no semicolon that goes there. If you put one there, you'll probably not get the results you want. In some languages, if you put one there, you're going to get an error message. All right. We've talked a little bit about line breaks. This right here, it's a little scary looking. And what literally this means right here, just so you know, is sometimes you'll see JavaScript code, if a person puts it inside of an HTML page, they'll separate it like this. And it's not a big thing anymore, but the reason that they do that is if you've got a really old browser, all right, and sometimes when a person turns off JavaScript, what shows on the screen is the code. So by putting it in between these tags here, all these, it says, hey, if you don't understand it, just treat it like a comment and don't show it. Now, you say, well, that seems like a lot of work. Then don't do that. Then put your JavaScript in an external file like I just showed you how to do. Then you don't have to worry about doing this. All right, this is why you're supposed to do that. You're separating your code from your markup. All right, so again, your HTML will be in one file. Your CSS will be in another file. Your JavaScript will be in a third file. All right, and I mentioned, I don't know if it was in this class or a different class the other day, but your HTML is your content. Those are your tags that make up your page. Your CSS is your presentation. That allows your this paragraph to be in red. All right, this to have a blue font or what colored font or whatever. And your JavaScript is basically your logic. All right, so they should each be put in their own file. It does make it easier to maintain. And this may not mean a lot to you, and it's pronounced like money, so that's pronounced caching. But what that says is when the computer caches a file, it puts it into memory, and it's got it in a certain place in memory, so if it needs it again, it can grab it from there. A lot of times if you go out to maybe CNN.com and you've got that on your screen, sometimes what it'll do is it'll cache, the system will cache that page for you. All right, and then if you leave it and come back again, it'll bring up the cache page. You got to watch it with stuff like that because what if that changed in between the time I stopped looking at it? So usually you have a timeout with a cache. It's not that important right now. All right, so they break this down right here. And they say you've got var, which is a keyword, y, which is the name of a variable, equals, which means assignment, and the stuff that's over here, that basically is an expression. It says take whatever value we have in x, multiply it by 4, and assign that value to y. All right. And you'd asked the question before about the parentheses in a function. This is a function. That's a JavaScript built-in function. That function, if you put nothing in here, you'd be saying, show me a box and don't put anything in it, which would be kind of silly to do. So I believe alert requires that you put something in there. Here's your reserved words. It's on the bottom of page 35. Again, what? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 20. It looks like 26, even less than I thought. In English, what that means is don't create a variable and give them any of these names. You say, but I like the name break. Then spell it B-R-A-K-E or spell it breaks, all right, with a S on the end type of thing. Maybe you've done this before, but if you go out and you say, I want this for a website. So let's say I wanted jeffscott.com and somebody had it already. Then they would come back and they would say, that's not available. Have you thought about jeffscott123.com type of an idea? All right, you could do the same kind of thing if you want to use something that's close to this. We'll talk about a lot of these words that are in here, but not every one of them. All right, we've already looked at if, so you've already seen that one. And notice what it says. Several other words are reserved for future use and therefore shouldn't be used in your program. Typically what that means is you can use them, But if it changes, JavaScript changes over time, your code might break. All right, we'll talk a little bit sooner or later about strict mode. All right, and those are words that you shouldn't use if you're in strict mode. They get into functions. I already showed you how to do a function. They've got a function example in here. All right, so I've already shown you. Theirs might be a little bit more complex. All right, but you've seen it anyway. All right, then they talk about strict mode here. Notice what it says. If you put your code into strict mode, it adds enhanced error checking and security. So you have to put basically at the top of your program, use strict. Because JavaScript, as I mentioned before, is an unbelievably forgiving language. What you're telling it when you put use strict in there is don't be so darn forgiving. All right? So there's certain things that it allows you to do. And for instance, in JavaScript, if I come in here and do this, if I say var x equals 33, remember that's the string 33, and I say var y equals 22, that's the number 22. And then I come in and I say var z equals y plus x. All right? There's a good chance that's going to give you 55. It'll automatically convert it over for you. All right? It may or may not happen like that. Sometimes if you reverse that, so if you put the string first and then add a number to it, so if you say x plus y, then you get this, where it concatenates it together. What you're saying, if you're putting it in strict mode, is I want to treat apples with apples and oranges with oranges. I don't want to let you mix those fruits, basically. All right? So really, if you put in there use strict, that's actually a really good way of doing things to make sure that you're writing code the way you're supposed to be writing it. All right, that's going to break a lot of rules that are shown in this book if you use strict all the time. Okay. All right, I'm just going to quickly jump into a little bit into chapter 4 just so you see this, and then we'll call it a period. So it's 9:32. If somebody can tell me when it's about 9:40, we'll just end about 10 minutes early today. All right. So this is chapter 4 in your book. It looks like it starts around page 41. So understand primitive data types. Primitive data types go by different names. The primitive data types, they're sometimes called scalar, S-C-A-L-A-R data types. They can only hold one value at a time. That's a primitive type. All right. Use functions associated with the data types. Create variables. You've already started doing that. All right. Define objects and arrays. I'm going to show you those, but it's going to be a really light little exposure to that. Okay? Understand variable scope, and here they actually do talk about debugging JavaScript with Firebug towards the end of the chapter. So if you look in here, it says these are the 6 data types that JavaScript allows you to have. Numbers, strings, booleans, nulls, undefined, and objects. All right? Now, numbers are any kind of number. Positive, negative, has a whole number, a number with a decimal place, numbers that you write in other not non-decimal notation like octal notation, which is base 8, or hexadecimal notation, which is base 16, etc. Any kind of number. Strings are anything within double quotes. Not only that, every example I've shown you, we've used double quotes, right, for our strings. You can also use single quotes in Java. Java doesn't discern, it doesn't have any difference between using single quotes and double quotes, but you can't start with a single quote and then with a double quote or vice versa. So it has to be a pair of single quotes or a pair of double quotes. All right? Boolean, that's true, false. So I might have a variable that's called married. And if it's set to true, the person's married. If it's set to false, they're not married. All right? You got to realize the computer doesn't understand a gray area. I remember talking to this woman. It was a friend of my wife's. We had some social gathering, and she said, "Well, how long have you guys been married?" And we talked for a while. And I said, "Are you married?" And she goes, "Sort of." No, that not to a computer. That doesn't make any sense. The computer doesn't understand sort of. All right. Null we've already talked about. That's unknown. And null and undefined, they're not exactly the same thing, because if I do this. Var name. and I immediately on the next line, I say, to print it out, so I say alert, name is plus name. Not sure if that's going to come out and say null or it's going to say undefined. But undefined is something you've declared, but you have not yet initialized. It's very similar to null. Null is unknown. All right. So well, think about it this way. If I said to John, what's your GPA? And he said, I don't know. That would be null. Some people think when you hear null like that, that means 0. I don't think he's got a GPA of 0.00. He just doesn't know what it is. And objects, that's a little bit more complex of a subject. So again, they talk about different types of numbers. If you print something out like this, that looks really ugly. And if you've never seen anything like that before, that's a number in base 16 notation. In base 16 notation, instead of like we do in base 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in base 16, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, and then 1, 0. All right, so it's just, they're telling you here, you can print numbers if you want to in different, using different numbering systems. All right, this is a good place to stop right here. So I think that is what I'm going to do. The other thing I want to mention to you is I've already written about 8 different payroll programs. And last year what I did, rather than what we did, is we just started keying stuff in. And some people seemed to get it right away and just went off and ran with it. And other people had the look on their face, the deer in the headlights look. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly introduce those to you, so I will put them out there. I want to go back and look at what I have, but we may get into that on Monday of next week. Last thing I'll tell you, and you probably already know this, not this next coming Monday, but the following one is Labor Day. The school's closed. All right, that's the 7th, so there will be no classes on that date. And you'll also miss another day because this is the first time they've ever done this in my 23 plus years here. The day before Thanksgiving is now optional for everybody, you and me. All right, so the labs might be open. We'll have to figure that out at the time, but you don't have to come. So that's a whole week's worth of class that we miss. All right, that's it. Again, if you have questions, see me, talk to me, email John. John will be here on Friday between about 8 and noon or 8 and 1, and Mike will be here, the other lab assistant, in the afternoon. Mike's the one who's here in the afternoons from 1 to 5, usually 12 to 5, Monday through Friday, and John's here 8 to 1. And the room is almost always free during the lunch hour. All right, and I think I said this the first day, but I'm saying it again. If you come in here, and I've got the second year people, most of my second year classes have between 10 and 15. If there's an empty seat, it's yours to use. All right, all I ask is if I'm lecturing that you don't print. All right, that's it. Now I'm done.